Hello, it's Pittsburgh Pat, and I'm here with Ryan Doyle of Verdigris Table. How's it going, Ryan?
Good. Good morning so far.
Good morning. Yeah, we played D&D last night, and we're going to recap that session. We have a bunch of rules updates that have come from the new player's handbook. So we're going to talk about some of those things and how Ryan has adapted some rules and how you can do the same things in your campaigns. And it's kind of like a good for DMs, beginner players, all that sort of stuff. That's who our target audience is with this segment. So, yeah, we're playing Ghost of Saltmarsh, one of the older campaigns in D&D, right? You said it throws back to the 80s, or at least.
It's one of the anthologies that came out in like the middle of the 5e era, the original 5e era.
Yeah,
We're still figuring out how to talk about this stuff.
yeah.
But the vast majority of it is adapted from older adventures. So it's like Tales from the Yawning Portal, I find is better known. But similar concept, all like nautically themed adventures over the decades that they've sort of stitched together a little bit. I have done way more to make it feel like a cohesive whole a little bit.
Oh, yeah,
Um,
definitely. And
but it's a good time.
I think if you felt like it, you could put your gain on uh your microphone up just a little tiny bit.
Sure.
I think that
Bam.
I think that might be better.
Okay. I'm
I know
up.
because I just got one of those too, and I'm still messing with my adjustments on that. Yeah, so we went back to Saltmarsh after negotiating a treaty, basically, or a agreement with the five in our party with the lizard folk. So we took back two lizard folk ambassadors to meet the city council of Saltmarsh, and they're going to negotiate whether or not they're going to collaborate against the threat of the shark men, right? Which,
Saugen.
yeah, I still don't know how to pronounce it.
I
Saltmarsh.
say it. I don't know if that's correct, but it's fun. So that's how I
You,
say
you
it.
say it fast, it doesn't matter how you pronounce it. So,
Yeah, I say it with confidence. Strong and wrong.
so one of the cool things about this was we got to meet a bunch of NPCs that we had already met, and I think
Hmm.
that's really important for campaigns. So, like, if you're gonna run a one shot, you might be able to do that. If you're gonna run a campaign and you got like the party goes off on a quest, goes into a dungeon, goes to another town. In our case, we sail off and we try to make an alliance with some strange folks. And and when you come back, you have this sense of familiarity, right? So you bring back the NPCs the party has already met, and now they feel like they have a home almost, right? So that's pretty cool. So we have a tiefling, kind of like underworld sort of type that will sell us magic items. So if we want magic potions, that sort of thing, we can buy them off of her. Uh, and then we have there's this kind of enigmatic wizard who we got to see again. He's really fun. He's kind of standoffish, but we're not even standoffish. Just we just don't know. We just don't get him. Like we just don't. I don't anyway. Get like what his motivation is, and he's not. Our first encounter with him, he was unimpressed, and now he's slightly less unimpressed, I think. So yeah, it was fun.
No spoilers, but he is
Yeah.
not he's neutral, right? Which means
Right.
he is not good.
Mhm.
He has his own agendas.
Mhm.
I think there's a tendency to like half of town. There's like a lot of politics in town, which we, the party will always care about exactly as much as it intersects with what they're doing, right? Like nobody cares
Right.
who the next mayor is really, unless it's one of the party members or they're
Or a
buds with
quest
the
giver.
mayor. He's a quest giver.
Right.
He's got rewards or sales, and then there's the shopping aspect. So I think it's some people's like mental categories. The wizard's like, oh, we need a spell scroll. Let's go hand the wizard money, and he will give us a spell scroll. And it's
Right.
like it's not you're going to this dude's house. It's not a storefront. He's
Right.
doing his own thing,
Right.
and he's smarter than you are.
Yeah, way smarter. And he and this is the second time we've interrupted his dinner. So we always seem to
Yeah.
go at dinner time. So that's the running joke now. So we're we're that person that wants you to sign a petition at the front door. We're the person that wants to, convert you to a different religion. We're that pesky kid that's selling candy,
Hmm.
or something like that. And meanwhile, we just interrupted this guy's day somehow. So, yeah, he wasn't sitting there waiting for us. Whereas other places, they're like happy to take our money because that's what they do. They're store owners.
Right.
So yeah,
Yeah.
so that's really cool the way you played that.
And it's that's something that it feels different if like we've talked about a couple times. Like we started this campaign with almost a TPK. Like I roll in
Yeah,
the open. I am willing to let characters drop to zero. Um, players have player characters have a million options to like redress that if somebody does drop.
yeah,
Not a level one so much. Um, but when an NPC burns you, like he got the best of you that first interaction. Like you went to like sell him a spell book,
Bubba,
had tiptoed up to like didn't want to say, "Hey, we killed this wizard" to this wizard.
right,
So you're like, "Hey, do you know this guy?" And he goes, "Yeah, sure. I'll get it back to him." And like and like you had handed it to him, and like that was you had no like mode of like getting coin for it at that point or whatever.
right,
Like he bested you, and as a person, I was like, "Oh man, I just like screwed over the players." But like, nah, the wizard did, and like he's not.
yeah.
That's what the wizard would do.
And
So
it's a memorable moment. So like when we
yes,
have our next encounter with him, like we're thinking about that. We're cautious. We're making sure we're not just handing him stuff to look at. We're talking about the deal before it happens. And yeah, and then so it we rolled a pretty good persuasion roll against him this time. So
mm,
we were able to negotiate a price. He was originally going to charge us 750 for a scroll that costs, or 700 for a scroll that's like listed in a handbook somewhere. I think Bertram's found out that it's worth about 500. I don't know. And so he came
that's
down in price. I don't know where he got that number, but yeah.
500. Well, it's true in 2014.
Okay.
We have prices for cantrips and level one spells in the PHB. The DMG is on its way, but
Yeah.
there's a lot of unanswered questions right now. Let's say.
Yeah, I just watched the video for that actually, to the official D&D Beyond video for that. So get ready for our talk on Friday.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, thanks for setting that up. Uh, so yeah, so Ryan runs or is part of a kind of round table.
Mm.
Is that how you would put it on
Yeah.
Friday at,
Casual
yeah,
casual
it's usually
Fridays.
streams live around 3 p.m. Eastern.
Yep, come everyone's welcome, come hang out. There's a lot of YouTubers in the chat. There's a lot it's a powerful chat. It is on my channel. It is also streaming on Brad from Dire Den's channel and GM Jim Wizards and Wordslingers on YouTube and Twitch. So it's going out to a bunch of different channels
Gotcha.
and chat talks to each other and it can be a lively chat. You got to figure out like where people are congregating on any given afternoon.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
there's some interesting folks that
Yeah, I
pop
always find the
in.
chats interesting because there's always a delay, and sometimes somebody will post something in the middle of a thought. So you're trying to address something that might be 4 lines up, but you get used to it. But there's people there's at least one person from New Zealand, so it's worldwide.
There's a few. There's a couple New Zealand, Oceania, D&D YouTubers and podcasters and stuff. It's a they don't always show up at 3 on time because it's like early for them.
Oh, is it? Yeah.
But they pop in. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd have to
It's
look at a globe to get the time zone, I get the time zone
mm,
map out. So so yeah, so we did our shopping trip. So, you know, D&D players, I think a lot of D&D players like shopping. I know like when I teach the kids, they love it when I give them the equipment list and they try to figure out how many gold pieces they have and how they can get more and whether or not they should pool their resources for a certain item, let's buff up the fighter and give him plate armor, or should we spend our our own money on our own things? It's always a really cool dilemma. It's a good thing for beginner players it incentivizes them to go out quest so they can get some more gold, so they can come back and equip their characters, which is always fun. But it also teaches a little bit about the in-game economy, and it gives the world building a sense of reality, I think, too, because you have an economy that's actually functioning, and you have shopkeepers that are actually trying to make a living, and that's in line with what we experience in real life. So I think that gives it a grounded sense of the fantasy. The high fantasy comes down to earth a little bit.
Yeah, my approach has evolved over time. I used to hate shopping. I was like, this is the least interesting part of this game. Let
Mhm.
us not do this at the table together. Why don't we do this between sessions? But now I do see it as almost a puzzle, right? Like, okay, the party has this much in resource. Like some groups divide everything right down the middle. Some groups will have like a community chest. Some groups, I find a lot of groups will actually end up doing both at once, which is kind of what you guys have fallen into
Yeah, we've fallen
lately.
into that. I think Mike likes to keep track of the party gold, so he's kind
Yeah.
of taking it on himself to be the accountant,
Yeah, sometimes you have a treasurer.
treasurer. Yeah.
But even if it is kind of like everyone for themselves, in those moments, people are like, well, I will give you my change so you can get your upgrade, whatever it is. It is part of character building, especially early days, early levels. Eventually you kind of max out on what buying stuff out of the PHP is going to get you.
Right.
And that's kind of where magic items come in, but whatever. We can talk about game balance a different day.
Yeah. Yeah.
But again, I've been doing less and less and trying to take a back seat. And for the first like hour or so, it was like challenging for me. There was a couple moments where I was like, all right, like where are we going? What are we doing? Hit the gas, hit the
Yeah,
gas.
we did. We kind of like this session kind of stuttered a little bit, I think, at the beginning, just because we wanted to get equipped, and I think I got the feeling that you're like, yeah, you're equipped. Let's get the next thing. But so what happened was we kind of resolved tied up loose ends with the council, and then they kind of went in their chambers and talked about, we're going to need you, but not right now. And so we got a quest from the tiefling, I want to say underworld leader, but that may or may not be true. That's just the way I categorize her in my mind.
She's from somewhere else,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
she's a ambassador from a place that is run by some sort of devil.
she's big red, and she wanted us to go get this box inside a box on a derelict ship that was on a rocky coast that possibly had run aground, um, off the coast of the I'm sorry, off the coast of Saltmarsh, uh, near an island called the Isle of the Abbey, or the
Mm,
Isle of Abbey. So yeah, Isle of the Abbey. So we decided we were going to go there, and we did. And as we did, see, we have a druid with us. That's Mike's character. The treasurer is the druid as well, and she's like this 6 foot tall princess from fairyland. He took an NPC from Dolmenwood, and took her skin and made a character out of that, which is awesome.
brilliant.
Yeah, she's like a frost maiden, I guess, and strange magical abilities, which he's described with great detail or great effect. I really enjoy the way he plays that character. But he can transform into things that can swim, we found out. So
Mm,
that's a little bit of a difference, right? So in the gameplay mechanics of the new 2024 Player's Handbook, there's a difference in the way um, druids can use their wild shape at early levels.
yes, the limitations that were there for everybody but moon druids, and they were still there for moon druids, but they got access earlier. But now the limit is flying creatures. I think somebody figured out that like bouquet swim speed is not that big of a deal in a lot of campaigns. So yes, so a druid has access to beasts that have a swim speed, and they can access that swim speed right from the jump. So he
Yeah,
was an octopus, and it
so he
works.
can turn into an octopus. And that's actually, when I looked at the beasts in the back of the 2024 manual, I think that's the only one I found that was a swimming creature, but that's the only one I found. There may be another.
I believe
But
it.
yeah, you can't fly until level 8.
Hmm.
So that's something to consider. Um, if you're going to play a druid, realize that that's far off. You know,
And you're
before it
not going to be
was
an owl bear.
no, yeah, or even a pseudo dragon.
Mm.
So you know, that's something that, you know, I think it'd be interesting for players to know. Um, you can swim pretty much right away, but you can't fly for a while. So we get on this boat, and somebody has the good fortune, or I think it was Patrick the Paladin, who there's two Patricks in the group in case you guys are tuning in for the first time. Me and my friend Patrick, and Patrick is playing a paladin. So I think he used some kind of divine sense in order
Mm.
to see if there were anything magical on board, and he sensed undead in the hold of the ship.
Yep.
So then we were all on edge because we were thinking, oh, that's going to be and you know, we'll just go on there, grab it. Oh, by the way, when Mike did turn into the octopus and went down, he found evidence of some kind of large sea creature, and you know, that had torn apart the boat, like some of the horizontal planks. We saw big round marks that would kind of indicate suction cups, and you said that you took that from like some kind of information of actual history, right? Where people had seen
Oh, yeah, like
evidence.
the best evidence we had that like giant squid were real. Like it's pretty recent that we discovered that like giant squid are real. Like there's been stories forever, but they live deep in the ocean. No one had seen one. But the best evidence was that whales had these wicked scars on them. So like, okay, if this is the largest, it's the largest mammal, right? If this gigantic creature has some sort of predation happening to it,
Right. What's
what does
that?
that mean? Like,
Right.
and I love that like open-ended. I do that a lot in my like campaign design.
Mhm.
Like, here's a scary thing. It's running from something. Like what? Like the thing behind it is
What's
even
behind you?
scarier. And
Yeah.
that's a natural way to like build a dynamic world and have like game balance, right? To like have like stepped levels of challenge in a seemingly natural way.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I like that dynamic. In fact, I just watched one of the Rings of Power episodes. That's right. The season two's currently streaming, and with new episodes every week. And they let go a troll. I think it was a large troll. I think it was, and the orcs had it, and the orcs are saying to their leader, "But he'll kill us too. He'll kill our
Mm.
men too." You know, because he's just kind of a berserker. You know, and so that's always fun too, where you can introduce a powerful character, but as the DM, you can balance it because maybe it just attacks everything in sight, you know, and that way it's a 50-50 chance or a 75-25 chance that it's going to hit the party. It might hit its own allies too. So if the party gets into a situation, you can actually, you know, logically determine that the narrative goes a certain way so that the party doesn't immediately TPK. Um, but yeah, you were rolling in the open again today, and you were rolling, or yesterday, and you were rolling 20s. So like, you got some those dice. That's pretty funny. Actually
I
bought new dice.
I am swingy. We were talking about like some people are hot, some people are cold. Like some people won't break a 10 all night. Some people like can't roll under a 15. Um, I am swingy. I go like I am both, but never not the same time. So like I don't know how it was hot last night. And I rolled three. There were three crits. There were three crits from these like giant spiders and eder caps. And like, you know, you're talking about poison on top of like you're talking about two damage types. So I'm rolling four die plus modifiers. Like there were some big numbers getting thrown around real
Yeah, let's
quick.
talk about that.
Yeah.
Poison damage. So like that's interesting. So like we have kind of a it's in the forefront of my mind because I had a character that was killed at level 1 by poison damage. So that's big in the party's mind. When we go up against creatures that, you know, you think, well, this is going to be a fair fight. But then you got two different damage classes coming at you,
Mm,
two
hmm.
different damage rolls. Now, of course, my character I built pretty high in Constitution, so I was able to save. But you still take half damage,
Hmm.
and um, and so when you roll poison damage, do you allow for the possibility of the poisoned condition then? When that happens?
Yes.
Okay.
So there were actually three monsters dishing out poison in that combat.
Mhm.
One of them applied the poison condition.
Okay.
One of them has like a rider that if their poison drops you to 0, it's a particular thing, but it doesn't impart the poison condition.
Okay. Gotcha.
And one thing we don't have the new monster manual in our hands at this point, but we
No.
had an adventure come out that had new, like seemingly new stat blocked creatures in it.
Mhm.
And we've learned it looks like the new design philosophy is they hand out all this stuff at once. They've kind of streamlined things, which in general I'm a fan of.
Mhm.
But they've done away with okay, you get hit with this attack, now make a saving throw. I do like that beat of like, okay, especially on a 20, right? But even a mundane exchange, roll damage. Okay, you take 8 points of piercing damage, and the player's like processing that, and before they've done the mental math, you're like, and now make a saving throw. And it's like boom, boom,
Mhm.
boom. It's like it hits harder than
Mhm.
okay, you take 8 points of piercing and 7 points of poison. Like that saves us 15 seconds, but you lose a bit of a dramatic beat in that moment.
Yeah, the drama is part of the game. And I think
Yeah.
that's pretty cool. And it also informed like what we did in the room too. So at one point it was like, okay, we're gonna all get in, especially for me playing a rogue. I want to have allies that are within 5 feet of my enemy so I can get advantage. And yeah, so I can get advantage, sneak attack.
Yeah. See,
Yeah,
well, sneak
both
attack.
sneak attack. So yeah, so at one point I could somebody retreated and then I was like, well, I guess we're retreating. So dive behind the altar. Yeah, so we find this ship with an altar on it, so that's never a good sign. Like what's a stone altar doing inside of a ship? So that kind of informed us that there might be some undead or some kind of creatures as the paladin found out in the hold. So that was pretty
Well,
wild.
yeah, spoilers, the altar was to Lolth, the Spider Queen, so that could explain all of the
Yeah,
poisonous spider creatures
yeah,
that are coming at you.
exactly. And then Craig, the new guy who's playing, he's playing a monk. We rolled for initiative finally after we had done all our shopping and everything. Like we didn't roll any dice for a long time. And then when we did, he's like, my initiative's 13. And I'm
Mm,
like, what? So there's an alternate rule on page 369 of the player's handbook. And it allows for initiative without rolling, basically.
hmm.
So if the DM wants to use this rule, it's your dex bonus plus 10. And then it's kind of like passive perception, right?
Yeah.
Or it's just that's that. And I'm trying to think like what instances would I want to use that and have that happen? And is there anything that you could think of? Like, because I wasn't.
Initiative is something that everyone has messed with at some point because they're dissatisfied with the way it works.
Hmm,
I've out of the gate, I think a lot of dungeon masters will use static initiative for monsters,
yeah.
and have the players roll. Especially in a dungeony situation, I will and especially in like a combat heavy session up front, sometimes I will have one initiative roll. Players like rolling dice.
Mhm.
So I will often, less than half the time, but I will occasionally have the players roll initiative for the session, not the combat.
Oh.
Keep that list and insert the monsters into it. Because again, talking about like dramatic beats and all, the 5 minutes of comparing and contrasting and like I use roll-offs, right? So like if two
Hmm.
players tie, the one with the higher dex modifier goes first. Sure. But we do a roll-off and now we're rolling more dice and it's more fun. It's a competition and like it's like gambling. Um, but sometimes rolling initiative will take the air out of the dramatic setup. That like, oh, there's a giant spider on the ceiling. It drops on you. It's going to sink its fangs in. Let's talk about turn order for 5 minutes. It's
Well,
sometimes it
yeah,
pulls the sometimes it gives you time to set up.
it does.
Sometimes it's like and like roll initiative in and of itself in a metagamey way is a big dramatic beat. Like, oh, it's going down. But I can, yeah, I like options. More the better. I don't see a lot of players enjoying static initiative. I'll put it that way.
That's the way I thought about it too. Like I said, like you say, I have different players at the table pretty much every time I DM. So, or I'm teaching, different kids, but like if I'm doing Adventure League, it's a one shot almost always. Sometimes it's a carryover from a previous session, but yeah, I usually have I usually have two combats. Sometimes I'll have an opportunity for a third, but I find that that doesn't time combats are time consuming. So
Yeah.
usually I have a limit of 3 hours in order to do my stuff. And I try to make it about 2.5, especially for beginner players. It can be a little overwhelming for them to be sitting there for a full 3 hours. So yeah, two, maybe three, maybe I'll light combat somewhere else. So I like to have them roll for initiative each time because it gives that player, if you're that high dex rogue, but you just happen to roll really low, then you're not going to be able to get the feeling of what that's like to be the one who makes the decisions or determines whether the party's going to try to negotiate their way out of this or dive
Mm.
right in. And and also while they're rolling, they can talk a little bit about strategy because then they do say, well, the wizard rolled first, so what's the wizard going to do? And then it's a moment for the DM to determine, for me to determine, am I going to let the party talk about this uh, for the sake of, you know, the social aspect of the game at the table? Or am I going to try to heighten the dramatic sense and say, nope, you're over here. And if you're going to talk to each other, you're shouting across the monsters in order to do that, and they're going to hear you. So, like, be
Mm.
aware of that. So,
Mm.
am I going to enforce the realism of the moment? So, but it gives that opportunity there. So that gives me another chance to do something um, to affect the flavor of the moment. And it also has the effect of like a cliffhanger. So like, the monster is about to get you, roll for initiative. And then it's like,
Yes.
tune in next week. Well, tune in 5 minutes when we resume this episode, and that can be fun. So
Yeah, it does. It's hitting the clutch, right? We're shifting gears. Here's like a pressure release valve. Like we're disengaging from like this aspect of the game, and now theoretically we're clicking into a higher gear.
that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And then so you talked about the spiders. So we had an interesting situation where the paladin actually had done something to buff himself. So his armor class was like 22. So he was
Mm.
not afraid to wade into the spiders at that moment. We had killed the big spider already. There was an ettercap we were finishing off, and then there were two kind of swarms of little spiders. And he was like, who cares? Let them jump on me. So we basically have like an Indiana Jones situation where there's a bunch of tarantulas crawling on this guy's, armor. So how do you shoot that stuff when, it's on his armor? And, what do you do? I thought that was interestingly done. So how do you handle a swarm logically? I am with a short bow and I'm going to attack a swarm of spiders. Realistically, I'm only going to hit one, maybe two, right?
Right.
So how do you do that mechanically for a new DM? Like, what advice do you give them?
Well, built in, and again, this is a 2014 stat block, but built in to swarms is damage reduction. They are going to take half damage from like physical attacks, essentially weapons attacks, piercing, slashing, bludgeoning damage is they're resistant to it. Um, and that makes perfect sense to me. You're not hit. It's a bunch of different creatures. You're only hitting some of them. You're not, doesn't matter where you hit. It's a single person. Okay, you hit them, you're doing damage. The swarm gets smaller. So there's also reflected in the stat block once it's bloodied, which is now a thing. It wasn't a thing in 5e, and it's a thing in 5.5. If it is reduced to half of its hit points, now it's doing half the amount of damage because there's half the amount of creatures fighting you in that thing. So
Gotcha.
it's always a delicate balance of realism and abstraction. You need a level of abstraction at some point. Like, how can I hit on a swarm can share a space with another creature. So a swarm of spiders is covering you. If it's in the same 5 foot square,
Yeah.
that's the mental image in my mind. That's the most interesting, dramatic, poetic version of that. And then the paladin moved, and it's like, do these guys come with me? I was like, oh, like
Yeah, there were some
I
interesting moments
ruled
there
it
where
as
you,
I said yes, but
yeah.
like we could have talked about that for 25 minutes if we
Well,
wanted to.
and that's exactly what a DM does. So a
Yeah,
DM like makes the final ruling on those kinds of instances. And that's exactly why the DM is designated as the person that's running it. So because the players could debate this for hours,
yeah.
maybe, and or other rules like that. Now the bloodied rule, I thought that's interesting. So that's in the book.
That's in the book. When a swarm is at half its health, the damage it's putting out is reduced by half.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Well, that's good to know. And then we had some interesting news. So we're going to lose one of our players potentially in 3 weeks. Yeah,
Yeah.
he may be moving away. So that's the other thing I wanted to talk about, a little bit of meta here, is that, you know, we all love this game. Otherwise, we wouldn't be watching this video. Or we're potentially interested in playing this game. But for new players, especially, what I'd like to say is, savor the moment,
Mm.
because you don't know what's coming next, right? You don't know. People get jobs, people graduate from school, people, have to move for one reason or another. Uh, just, get in there and play, when you can, because, that's going to change the dynamic. Anytime somebody leaves a party, it's going to change dynamic. I mean, 2 weeks ago, we had a player who was on vacation and it changed the dynamic,
Yeah.
it was interesting. But, and there were moments where I remember saying, oh man, Mike would love this, and so, but it gave us the opportunity also to like recap the story for Mike. So when he came back, we got to tell him kind of the way the players would tell somebody who was away and fill them in on, what actually happened while they were gone. So that was pretty cool. That's always fun too.
Yeah. I used to start every session with a recap. Now, more often than not, especially in a situation where like someone needs to be filled in, I will let the players do it. And that is more interesting for the players. That gives me some insight to like what's going on in your heads. Like, have you made some assumptions that are interesting and I'm going to run with? Have you made some assumptions that I need to course correct because
Yeah,
the
that's not
character
quite what
would know a
happened.
thing that the player didn't necessarily realize? Um, personally, I'm a lot sharper at starting than at towards the end of the session. Like something might get left by the wayside. Like, oh, here's an important detail that like I thought I told you because I practiced in my mind how I was going to tell you enough that like it convinced me that I had done it, but like maybe I didn't.
Oh yeah.
Or I or you're not as sharp after 4 hours of survival in a meat grindery dungeon and you haven't absorbed that information because you're packing up your dice when I'm saying it or something.
Oh
So
yeah,
it's
and
good
we
for
talk
that.
about this all the time. There's ambient noise in the location. There was one lady who had a particularly interesting laugh. I kept trying to identify who she was, but she was on the other side of the room and I
Oh,
couldn't
that's
like
interesting.
peg her, but like she had this really infectious, hilarious laugh. But yeah, Mike is our guy who brings like the toolbox full of minis. So
Yes.
like if you say Ettercap, he's got one. And then Giant Spider, no problem. He definitely had that one. But my wife just bought these stress cubes um, for like fidget cubes, I guess. Like
Mm,
when you're like stressed, I guess you play around them. And so I was like, she bought them. She got them last Thursday, right before I was going to go and do Adventure League. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's a gelatinous cube.
That's the second it was on the
I,
second I sat down and it was on camera. I was like, that's a
yeah,
gelatinous cube if
I
I've
need
ever seen
this.
one.
So I took one of the little penguin figures that she gave me, and I was like, this is just perfect because it looks
Mm,
like now it looks like it's in the cube,
hmm.
and I don't know. Anyway, it's fun to have toys and different props to play with, and Mike provides us with ours, a large portion of ours, but yeah, it's I saw a lot of people that weren't playing D&D, I don't think, that were sort of half in costume last night too. So I think the fact that it's early October is getting to be, we saw a lady with this pink skull purse that was very striking. I thought that was amazing.
It was phenomenal.
Yeah.
It's rare for me to stop what I'm doing and lean over and be like, I love your purse. Like that's not a thing that comes out of my mouth very often. But ooh, it was very, I was like, is that a game? I'm pretty sure that's your bag, but it could be because Phil and we more on Phil soon.
Yeah.
But that the game shop has like a lending library, has like tons and tons and tons and tons of games, and there's always new stuff in there. So like I was willing to believe this Dayglow pink skull with the zipper on it was some sort of game I had never heard of, but it was her bag. I was like, yes. If I yeah,
Yeah,
maybe I want that. I'm comfortable. I don't
that's
know if I'm comfortable enough with my masculinity to walk around with a pink skull purse.
well, I
Um,
mean, we're
but that
walking
just means I
around
have.
with, I don't know, I'm walking around with a backpack. I brought a sword the one day. We have I think for Halloween, the Halloween session, I'll wear my witch's hat. I
Nice.
got like a dollar store witch's hat after Halloween for a buck or 50 cents one time. I'm like, oh yeah, there's definitely gonna be an occasion to wear this. So instant costume. Um,
I walked into Sheets in full like Ren Fair, Zelda-y elf regalia. And I was like, oh, this is a milestone in my battle with anxiety. And I was just like, I'm buying gas and a sandwich with elf ears on. I was like, okay, yep, this is me now. Let's go.
it's it's the point is, I think we've gotten to the point where everything's normal.
Yeah,
And many things are normal, it's not that big a deal. And in fact, I mean, when Tara and I were walking to the first day of TechoCon,
mm,
we were on the street, maybe 3 or 4 blocks away from the convention center, and a lady did actually like ask us in passing, like, "What's going on? I see all
yeah.
these people in costumes." So, but it was a Thursday, like, or no, it was a Friday, and it was still like ta- the city's still in business mode, so like they're not ready to see elves and fairies and cowboy bebop characters running around. And they were like, why is everybody wearing weird hats and strange costumes and carrying very large swords? So
And people might not know it unless they've spent some time in Pittsburgh. And I feel like Pittsburgh, it's the 75th most populous city in the US. It's not necessarily on everybody's
it's not
radar,
Houston, it's
but
not like, yeah,
it's not New York or LA
no,
or San Francisco or Seattle or whatever. But one, people are very chill without it being without them being all up in your business, right? It's not small town southern vibes. People are nice, but they also respect your time. And Pittsburgh is nerdy as fuck. Like people don't realize that like the game shops per capita here is huge.
yeah, it's exploded. Just recently, like it's amazing. Like I think there are 10 that I could name.
There's three that I could walk to. I could walk to three game shops. I need to pass two to get to Phil. And
Mm,
there's like this is the pinball capital of the states. There's two competitive leagues and a museum for pinball.
mm,
The convention scene here is wild. Like
mhm.
it's a cool town. I'm brought to you by the Pittsburgh Tourism Board. Um,
Yeah, and we'll have a very long interview with Phil. I'll have excerpts, but I don't know if I could edit the whole hour and 43 minutes that we talked yesterday. But yeah, so we'll be covering our favorite local game store, where I spend most of my gaming time. And yeah, so look forward to that too. and look forward to next week's recap. So that was this was more of like a rules thing, but I'm starting to realize that my audience seems to be early players or people who are interested in playing and haven't played yet. So I think that's the kind of vibe I'm going for. But whoever you are, put comments in the section. I'm happy to answer any questions you have. And Ryan, it's always great to talk to you. So
Thanks
I'll
for having me,
see-
Ben.
yeah, I'll see you on the next one.